What if behind the splendor and wisdom of King Solomon, there was a woman whose power threatened to rewrite history? The Queen of Sheba wasn't just a visitor. She was a force, a mystery wrapped in gold and secrets. What did she truly seek when she crossed deserts and seas to meet Solomon? Was it riches, knowledge, or something far more dangerous? Something hidden from the world for centuries? Get ready to uncover the untold story of a legendary queen whose story echoes through history. One that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about power, love, and destiny. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this is the story you don't want to miss. Long before her camels groaned under the weight of gold and spices, before the name Sheba echoed in the courts of Jerusalem, there was silence. Silence that reigned over the southern desert kingdoms, where the incense trees bent in the wind and where the people worshipped under stars that seemed older than time itself. Silence that wrapped around a young queen who would later disturb the peace of Solomon's wisdom with a single gaze. Her name was Makeda, but the world would only remember her by her title Queen of Sheba. She ruled not from arrogance, but from ancient blood. Her people, dark and regal, traced their lineage to Cush, the son of Ham, and from him to Nimrod, the hunter who challenged the heavens. Her throne stood upon lands where the winds sang over her fields and the mountains wept with frankincense. Sheba was rich, but its wealth was veiled, hidden in shadows and mystery, and so was its queen. Makeda had learned early to speak little and listen long. Her mother was a priestess, her father a king slain by internal rebellion. The gods of her people had demanded silence and sacrifice, but Makeda was restless. She had ruled since her 16th year. Now in her 30th, she had everything: palace, power, even prophets. But there was one thing she did not have: truth. Truth. That was what disturbed her at night. She had read scrolls brought in from foreign caravans, scrolls that whispered of a king in a land called Israel. A king not born of ancient conquest but of a shepherd's line. A king who did not sacrifice to idols, but claimed his wisdom came from one God. Not Baal, not Dagon, not even the sun. Just one God, Yahweh, the invisible one who dwelled not in temples made with hands. At first, she dismissed the reports as fables, trade gossip designed to amuse. But the stories kept coming. Caravans from Tyre, from Sidon, from Egypt, all telling the same tale. That this man, Solomon, had answers no man could summon. That he spoke in riddles that unraveled the soul. That kings bowed before him not just because of his riches, but because he knew things only heaven could reveal. Makeda was no fool. She had heard of men who claimed to be gods, of oracles who spoke in madness. But Solomon was different. They said he built a temple so magnificent that even Egypt's high priests grew jealous. That he ruled not just men, but beasts. That he commanded demons and birds alike. That the sea yielded its secrets to him, and even the wind obeyed him. The rumors were mad, but they were too many to ignore. And so, on a cold desert morning when the stars had barely faded from the sky, she stood alone on the eastern wall of her palace. Wrapped in royal shawls, her hair braided with gold rings, she stared north, toward Israel, toward Jerusalem, toward Solomon. She clenched her jaw. Her heart had questions, and no one in Sheba could answer them. The decision came not from excitement, but from unrest. Her priests begged her to stay. Her advisors warned her of danger. But Makeda silenced them all with one sentence: "I must test the man who claims to hold the secrets of heaven." And so the preparations began. The desert palace of Sheba roared with motion. Gold was pulled from vaults. Spices were gathered from the highlands. Gems were polished until they bled fire. Camels were chosen, strong, trained for long journeys. Her guards, skilled with curved swords and black shields, were instructed to follow, but not interfere. She would go as a queen, yes, but also as a seeker. Makeda knew what she would bring, but not what she would return with. She had no intentions of submitting to another ruler. She was a monarch in her own right. But part of her wondered if this journey would change her forever. Not in title, but in soul. What if this Solomon truly spoke with God? What if his temple truly held the glory of the Most High? What if the rumors were not only true, but understated? The sun was rising now. Crimson and gold flooded the horizon. A servant approached, whispering that the caravan was ready. Makeda nodded. As she descended the stairs of her palace, hundreds bowed. Children threw petals. Priests offered prayers to the gods of Sheba. But her eyes were set on a path only she could walk. A path toward the unknown. Behind her, the land of Sheba glistened in royal pride. Before her, the wilderness waited. Sandstorms, bandits, wild beasts, all dangers she had already calculated. But what she could not calculate was the look she would see in Solomon's eyes, or the challenge that would rise between their souls when wisdom met royalty, when spirit met spirit. As her caravan departed, Makeda whispered softly to herself, a prayer not to her gods, but to the air. If this man is truly wise, then let him answer the question I have never dared to ask even myself. And with that, the desert swallowed her silhouette. The Queen of Sheba was on her way, not to conquer a man's throne, but to test the fire behind his wisdom. What she didn't know was this: Solomon was already waiting. If you're amazed by the power and mystery of Queen Sheba, hit the like button now and share this story with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe. There's so much more hidden wisdom coming your way. The dust had not yet settled when the golden city of Jerusalem rose into view. Like a crown set upon a hill, it shimmered under the noon sun, its gates towering, its watchmen alert. The Queen of Sheba had traveled nearly 2 moons across the unforgiving deserts, crossing foreign lands, bartering passage through hostile territories, and defying the quiet whispers of men who claimed such a journey was beneath a queen. But now, as her long caravan began its slow approach to the southern gate, silence fell upon her entourage. She was close. The streets of Jerusalem had been swept clean. Word of her coming had reached Solomon's court weeks before. Spies along the borders had seen the strange banners, the procession of black-clad warriors, the camels draped in crimson silk, the foreign smell of myrrh and cinnamon filling the wind. The people whispered, "Who was this woman whose name rode on the wind like a song? Queen, yes, but from where? And why had she come?" Solomon, seated in his palace carved of Lebanon cedar, knew the answer before his scribes spoke it. He felt it in the air, a tremor not of war, but of challenge. This was not a merchant queen seeking alliances. No, she was a question wrapped in gold. And Solomon, in all his wisdom, understood that heaven does not send such questions lightly. He rose. Makeda, adorned in garments of deep indigo trimmed with lion fur, rode a white desert mare at the front of her caravan. Her crown was unlike any worn by Israel's queens, layered with obsidian, firestones, and strange symbols etched in ancient script. Her eyes, black and deep as oil wells, scanned the gate with royal calm. There was no fear in them, but neither was there arrogance. She was a monarch entering another monarch's court. But she came not to bow. The gate opened. Trumpets sounded. Not harsh, but rich, layered like the voice of a choir. Solomon's guards stepped forth in golden armor, their faces solemn. Sheba's warriors watched carefully, hands near their scimitars, but Makeda raised a hand. "We came in peace," she whispered. "Let us see if they meet us in truth." As she crossed through the gate, the city erupted in whispers. Children clung to their mothers. Merchants paused in their trades. Even priests in white linen turned to watch the woman who had traveled the world to confront wisdom. And then, it happened. Solomon descended from his throne room, not in full royal armor, but in a simple robe of white, his crown resting lightly on his head. His beard trimmed, his eyes bright like the morning sky. He did not walk with fanfare, but with the ease of one who knew his authority needed no display. When their eyes met, Makeda and Solomon, time seemed to pause, not out of romance, not yet, but out of sheer spiritual voltage. 2 worlds, 2 powers, 2 minds trained in silence and command, locked in a moment of stillness that echoed beyond the gates. Solomon bowed, not low, not submissively, but with the respect only one ruler shows another. Makeda returned the gesture, her eyes never leaving his. "Queen of Sheba," Solomon said at last, his voice deep and calm. You have come far. Makeda tilted her head. Wisdom draws farther journeys than war. A smile ghosted Solomon's lips. He turned, extending his hand. Come, you shall rest. And when your spirit is ready, we shall speak. And so, the woman who had never bowed to a god she could not see walked side by side with the man who built a temple to one. The palace halls of Solomon were no mere decorations of wealth. Makeda noticed at once. The structure was not built to impress flesh, but to reflect thought. Every corridor was balanced, every color chosen with intention. The gold did not shout, it hummed. The air itself smelled not of perfume but of cedar wisdom. This was not the palace of a king who sought praise. This was the heart of a man who had asked God for understanding, and had received it. But Makeda had not come to admire beauty. She had come to test it. Later that evening, after her servants were settled and her guards posted at her door, she sat alone in the guest chamber Solomon had given her. A scroll lay across her lap. It was written in Hebrew, she could not yet read it, but she knew it was sacred, perhaps a proverb, perhaps a psalm. She looked up at the ceiling, her mind buzzing. He is calm, she murmured to herself, but I see the fire beneath. I wonder if he sees mine. The next day she requested audience. The chamber where they met was not grand, but filled with light. Sunlight spilled through the lattice windows, casting patterned shadows upon the floor. Solomon was already there, seated not on a throne, but on a simple seat of olive wood. A second chair awaited her. She took it. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Makeda said, I have heard your fame. They say your God gave you wisdom beyond the minds of men. I have not come to flatter you, but to test you. Will you answer my questions? Solomon nodded once. Ask. And so the game began. She asked him riddles first, old ones from Nubia, Sumeria, and Arabia. Some were known. Some were twisted. Some had no real answers at all. Solomon answered each, not with arrogance, but with clarity. He turned every riddle inside out, showing its bones, exposing its flaw, or revealing its hidden depth. But Makeda had deeper questions, questions no man had yet answered. What is the weight of truth? She asked. What can be seen by the blind, but never by the sighted? What rises in man, but is not of flesh or thought? And Solomon, with a calm breath, answered them all, not as puzzles but as revelations. Makeda began to tremble, not from fear, but from awe. She realized she had come expecting wisdom, but what she had found was revelation. It was as if the very air in Solomon's presence carried a frequency her soul had never heard before. And slowly, she began to realize. She was no longer testing him. He was reading her. By the end of the meeting, she could not rise immediately. Her heart was unsettled, not in defeat, but in awakening. She had seen kings fall in battle. She had silenced rebellions. But never had she felt so exposed, so utterly known, as she did sitting across from this man. Solomon rose. You have great understanding, he said. Few dare to ask questions with real weight. Makeda stood at last, her voice lower now. And fewer still can answer them without trying to impress. Their eyes met again. No words passed between them, but something ancient stirred in the spirit realm. For this was not the meeting of strangers. It was the meeting of appointed destinies. Makeda returned to her chamber that night and stood by the window, looking out over Jerusalem. Her heart burned, not with desire, but with a question even she dared not name. Who is this man? She whispered to the stars. And why does he feel like prophecy? Curious to learn what secret plans and truths lie beneath this royal encounter? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single piece. The next morning dawned crisp and golden, but for the Queen of Sheba, it was heavy with a new weight, the weight of questions that refused to be silenced. After the intense exchange of riddles and wisdom, she had hoped to find answers, but instead she found herself tangled deeper in the mysteries that defined Solomon's reign. The court buzzed with anticipation of her next move, yet Makeda felt that the greatest challenge awaited her alone, within the walls of the palace. Solomon's servants had prepared a feast that reflected the grandeur of his kingdom. Platters of roasted lamb, bowls of honey-soaked figs, spiced wines, and exotic fruits from distant lands. Yet, as the feast unfolded, Makeda's mind remained elsewhere. She studied the man who ruled with a wisdom that many said came directly from God. His gaze was calm but piercing, his smile warm yet guarded. Around them, the courtiers and scribes whispered, eager for a sign that this foreign queen might challenge Solomon's wisdom, or perhaps betray weakness. But both rulers sat poised, like two mighty lions circling in a dance of power and respect. Neither rushed, neither yielded. After the meal, Makeda asked to speak with Solomon alone. The king agreed, and they moved to a secluded chamber where only the faint scent of incense lingered. Makeda looked Solomon in the eyes. Your wisdom has answered my riddles. Your mind has unfolded secrets I never expected to hear. But now I ask you something deeper, something no one has dared to ask before. Solomon inclined his head slightly. Speak, Queen of Sheba. I will listen. She took a breath, steadying herself. Tell me, King Solomon, what burdens your heart? What secret does your crown hide that no crown should ever bear? The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Solomon's face, usually so unreadable, flickered with a shadow of vulnerability. I am a man, he said softly, who carries the hopes of a nation on his shoulders. My wisdom, my power, it is a gift, yes, but it is also a chain. I seek to understand the hearts of men. Yet sometimes I wonder if my own heart grows weary under the weight of judgment and expectation. Makeda listened, sensing layers beneath the king's words. Here was a man who ruled not just with knowledge, but with the burden of constant vigilance. Your wisdom is your kingdom's light, she replied, but even the brightest flame casts the darkest shadow. Tell me, Solomon, what is the greatest fear of a king who holds the world in his hands? Solomon paused, eyes distant. That I will fail the trust placed in me, that my decisions will lead my people into ruin, or that my own heart will betray the justice I swear to uphold. Makeda nodded, feeling the truth in his confession. It was a fear she herself knew well. As queen, her own reign was marked by struggles to maintain power, to conquer enemies not just with armies but with cunning. Yet Solomon's fear was different. It was the fear of a king who carried divine wisdom, and the heavy price it demanded. She stepped closer. You say your heart may betray you. Tell me, do you trust the God who gave you this wisdom to guard your heart? Solomon's eyes met hers, fierce now with conviction. I must, for without that trust, I am lost. But even faith does not shield a man from the loneliness of his calling. Makeda's expression softened. She knew then that her journey was not just about testing Solomon's wisdom, but about confronting the very essence of what it meant to lead. Two sovereigns, each carrying their own burdens, meeting in a moment that transcended politics and power. Suddenly, a messenger burst into the room, breathless. Your Majesty, urgent news from the borders. Solomon's face hardened instantly, the vulnerability replaced by the commanding presence of a king. What is it? The southern tribes have rebelled, the messenger reported. They challenge your authority, and there are whispers of alliance with distant kingdoms. Makeda stood, her eyes flashing with fierce pride. Then your wisdom will soon be tested not just by riddles, but by the fire of war. Solomon nodded, his hand resting briefly on hers. A silent promise of alliance, or perhaps something deeper. The tension in the room was palpable. The queen who had come seeking wisdom found herself on the edge of a war that could unravel the peace of a kingdom. And Solomon, the man who carried divine knowledge, now faced a threat that would test not only his mind but his soul. As the sun set over Jerusalem, both monarchs knew that their fates were intertwined in ways neither could yet understand. The story of the Queen of Sheba was no longer just about a woman who conquered a king's mind. It was about two leaders whose destinies would shape the course of history. As dawn broke over the golden hills surrounding Jerusalem, the peaceful hum of Solomon's court was shattered by urgent news. The southern tribes, long restless and proud, had risen in rebellion. Their banners no longer bowed to the crown, and whispers spoke of alliances forged with distant enemies eager to see Solomon's kingdom crumble. This rebellion was no ordinary uprising. It was a threat that cut deep into Solomon's vision of a united Israel. His advisors fretted and debated, but Solomon's calm wisdom remained his greatest weapon. Yet beneath his composed exterior lay a storm of worry. Could his famed wisdom solve a conflict that threatened to spill blood across his lands? Makeda, the Queen of Sheba, stood silently at the edge of the council chamber, her keen eyes absorbing every word. She knew well the burdens of rule, the delicate dance of power, loyalty, and war. Her own kingdom of Sheba faced threats from rival tribes and kingdoms, and she had mastered the art of strategic alliances and swift decisions. "Your Majesty," Makeda spoke, her voice steady and clear, "war tests not only the strength of armies but the heart of a king. If I may offer counsel, let us seek to understand the cause of this rebellion. Sometimes the fiercest battles are fought not with swords but with wisdom and mercy." Solomon regarded her thoughtfully. "Your insight is as sharp as your fame, Queen Makeda. We shall send envoys to parley with the rebel leaders and uncover the truth beneath their defiance." As the days passed, Solomon and Makeda worked together, blending their wisdom and diplomacy. Envoys returned with tales of old grievances, land disputes, unfair taxes, and ancient rivalries stoked by fear. The rebellion was fueled not just by power but by pain. Makeda suggested a bold plan: to invite the rebel leaders for a feast at the palace, to hear their grievances face to face, and to show them the strength of unity rather than division. The court buzzed with tension and curiosity. Could Solomon, the wisest king, turn enemies into allies with words alone? Could Makeda's counsel bridge a chasm steeped in blood and distrust? Cloaked in worn furs and hardened expressions, the air thickened with suspense. Solomon greeted them not as foes but as honored guests. The feast was lavish but solemn, each gesture measured to convey respect and peace. Makeda watched as Solomon spoke, his voice firm yet compassionate, unraveling the grievances with promises of justice and fairness. Slowly, the hardened faces softened. It was a fragile peace, but peace nonetheless, a victory of wisdom over war. Yet even as celebrations began, shadowy figures lurked in the court, whispering of treachery and plots to ignite the fires of war once more. The threat was quelled, for now, but the kingdom's future remained uncertain. After the tensions of the rebellion eased, Makeda invited Solomon to journey with her to Sheba, her homeland, a land spoken of in hushed awe across the ancient world. This was no mere journey. It was a passage into a realm of wealth, mystery, and power unlike any Solomon had seen. Sheba was a land where the sun kissed endless deserts, where towering palm trees swayed beside fertile valleys bursting with spices, gold, and precious stones. The people of Sheba were proud, skilled traders and warriors, guardians of secrets passed down through generations. As they traveled, Makeda shared stories of her ancestors, rulers who had forged Sheba into a beacon of prosperity. She spoke of the challenges her kingdom faced, threats from jealous neighbors, harsh climates, and the delicate balance of tribal alliances. Solomon listened, fascinated not only by the richness of Sheba but by the queen herself, her strength, her insight, her unyielding dedication to her people. In the bazaars and palaces, Solomon witnessed the fusion of culture, religion, and politics that defined her reign. The queen revealed a hidden chamber within her palace, where ancient scrolls and prophecies were guarded. Among them lay a prophecy that spoke of a union between Sheba and Israel, a destiny that neither kingdom could deny. Makeda's voice dropped to a whisper. "This prophecy has shaped my choices, Solomon. It speaks of a future where our peoples are united, not just by trade or treaties, but by blood and faith." Solomon's mind raced. Could this prophecy explain the strange pull he felt toward the queen? Was their meeting the weaving of divine threads in a grand tapestry? Their stay in Sheba deepened their bond and raised the stakes of their alliance. But beyond the beauty and opulence lay a shadow, a rival faction within Sheba, jealous and fearful of the queen's closeness to Solomon, plotting to undermine her rule and sever ties with Israel. To honor the new alliance, Makeda prepared a grand gift for Solomon, a collection of treasures unmatched in their splendor and significance. These were not mere trinkets but symbols of trust, respect, and the weight of their growing bond. Gold mined from Sheba's richest veins gleamed like captured sunlight. Exotic spices filled delicate jars with scents that whispered of distant lands and ancient rituals. Rare jewels sparkled with colors unseen, each telling stories of nature's marvel and human craftsmanship. As Solomon accepted these gifts, he saw beyond their material value. Each item was a message, a promise of friendship, a test of his humility, and an invitation to deepen their alliance. In return, Solomon gave Makeda gifts of wisdom and sacred artifacts from Israel, scrolls inscribed with the words of God's laws, and objects blessed by priests. These gifts carried spiritual weight and conveyed Solomon's respect for the queen's intellect and faith. The exchange of gifts was a ceremony steeped in meaning. Courtiers watched in awe, some with admiration, others with envy. The queen and the king understood that these tokens were more than diplomacy. They were the building blocks of a legacy. But amidst the splendor, Makeda's heart held a secret. She wondered how much of Solomon's wisdom was divine, and how much was the burden of a man who must constantly guard his throne from forces seen and unseen. Their alliance was blossoming, but danger lurked, both within the palace walls and beyond the borders. The queen who conquered Solomon's mind was also a queen who knew the cost of power and the sacrifices it demanded. The sun had barely dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Solomon's grand hall, when the court gathered for a spectacle unlike any before. It was a contest of intellect and spirit, a duel of wisdom between two of the ancient world's greatest minds, King Solomon of Israel and Queen Makeda of Sheba. The hall brimmed with courtiers, priests, and scholars, all eager to witness this historic encounter. Torches flickered against stone walls etched with sacred inscriptions, and the air was thick with anticipation. Solomon sat upon his throne, regal and calm, his deep brown eyes reflecting the flickering flames. Across from him, Makeda carried the serene confidence of a ruler who had conquered deserts, battles, and hearts alike. Her luminous bronze skin glowed softly, and her piercing gaze met Solomon's without flinch. The duel began not with weapons, but with words, riddles and parables, questions and answers that danced like fire. Makeda posed the first riddle, her voice a melodic challenge. What is that which is born of the earth, yet flies without wings, and feeds all creatures without ever growing hungry? Solomon's eyes narrowed in thought. Moments stretched into eternity. Then, with a slight smile, he answered, "It is the wind, the breath of life that carries the seeds and the storms, unseen but felt by all." The court murmured in approval, but Makeda's eyes sparkled with renewed vigor. The contest wove deeper, touching on the mysteries of life, justice, and the divine. Each challenge was met with wisdom, yet neither gave ground. It was more than a duel. It was a communion of souls, a meeting of destinies. As the evening wore on, the tension shifted from rivalry to mutual respect. The queen's questions were not mere tests but invitations to understanding, and Solomon's answers revealed not just intellect but humility and insight into the human heart. By the time the stars blanketed the sky, the duel reached a silent truce. Makeda rose, her voice soft but clear. "King Solomon, your wisdom is a light in the darkness. But wisdom is more than knowledge. It is the bond that unites peoples and hearts. Let us forge that bond, for our kingdoms and for our peoples." Solomon rose as well, his expression warm yet serious. "Queen Makeda, you have challenged not only my mind but my very soul. Together, we can build a future where Israel and Sheba stand as one, stronger than any threat or shadow." Their words carried the weight of more than diplomacy. They were the seeds of a profound alliance. The court, once filled with tension, now buzzed with hope and speculation. Over the following days, Solomon and Makeda met privately, weaving plans that intertwined their kingdoms in ways both political and personal. They spoke of treaties that would bring peace to borders long troubled, of trade routes that would flow with prosperity, and of shared wisdom that could illuminate the path forward. But beyond strategy lay a deeper connection, one of respect, admiration, and an unspoken bond that neither dared name, yet both felt growing stronger with every encounter. Makeda's heart, hardened by years of rule and war, softened in the presence of Solomon's quiet strength. Solomon, who bore the heavy crown of Israel, found in Makeda a kindred spirit, one who understood the sacrifices of leadership and the loneliness it often brought. Yet even as their alliance blossomed, shadows gathered at the edges of their worlds. Rival factions in both kingdoms whispered of betrayal and ambition, unwilling to accept the changing tides. Theirs was a union fraught with danger, political, spiritual, and deeply personal. Still, Solomon and Makeda stood united, their minds sharpened by the duel of wisdom and their hearts entwined by the promise of a future where their kingdoms would no longer stand alone but rise together, unbreakable, enduring. This story teaches us that true power is not just about wealth or armies, but wisdom, courage, and the strength to challenge even the greatest. The Queen of Sheba reminds us that boldness and knowledge can change destinies. If this journey into the life of the Queen of Sheba has captivated your heart and mind, smash that subscribe button, share with someone who loves epic stories, and ring the notification bell, because the next chapter will reveal even more breathtaking secrets. Closing prayer. Lord, grant us the wisdom to seek understanding beyond what is seen, the courage to face the unknown, and the humility to learn from those who walk different paths. May we be inspired by the strength and grace of those who dared to conquer challenges with their minds and hearts. Amen.